They called him a mechanic like it was an insult. People said it with a kind of smirk that always carried hidden laughter. In Umuozu, where everyone knew everyone, names stuck faster than paint on iron. For years, Chike lived with that name. He wore it quietly, like an old shirt, without protest or shame. He had oil-stained hands and a tiny workshop beside the narrow road that led to the market. From morning till evening, the clang of tools and hum of engines filled that small space. Chike wasn't the kind of man people noticed. He was lean, quiet, and always smelled faintly of grease. Yet, behind his calm face was a fire no one saw. Every time a car passed by, shining and new, his eyes followed it. Not out of envy, but hunger. He wanted to know how it worked, how it moved so smoothly, how he could one day touch such perfection. People brought their cars to him when they broke down. Some stayed to watch, pretending curiosity but whispering jokes. "See our professor of dirty engines," one man once said, laughing loudly enough for others to hear. Chike only smiled faintly. He had learned to let words roll off him like rain on metal. He lived in a small one-room apartment behind the workshop. His mother used to say, "Chike, you were meant for more than tightening bolts." But she died before she could see what he was becoming. After her death, he threw himself into work. He saved every naira, fixing bikes, old cars, even generators. Sometimes he ate gari for days so he wouldn't touch his savings. There was a woman in the village, Adaora, who sold food near the junction. She always kept a plate of jollof rice for him, even on days he had no money. She liked to tease him. One day, "Chike, you'll fix a car so fine that the owner will forget to take it back." Her laughter had a warmth that made his evenings lighter. But not everyone saw him kindly. Some men mocked him, especially Okafor, who ran a transport company. Okafor had once brought his old bus for repairs, and when Chike mentioned that the engine needed replacing, he laughed in his face. "You? Replace engine? You think you're in Germany," he said. From that day, Okafor never stopped calling him Mechanic Boy. Still, Chike worked in silence. He didn't waste time replying insults. He had dreams that were too heavy for small talk. He wanted his own garage, not the shaky shed where he patched engines with borrowed tools. He wanted to learn modern cars, the kind he only saw online. Late at night, when everyone slept, he would borrow a friend's phone and watch videos on how to fix them. He studied without a teacher, pausing and replaying until he understood every part. One evening, rain poured without mercy. The village was quiet except for the sound of thunder and dripping roofs. Chike sat inside his workshop, tightening the last bolts of a customer's car. The flickering light bulb above him swung slightly with the wind. As he cleaned his hands, his old phone rang. It was a number he didn't know. "Are you Chike, the mechanic near Umuozu Junction?" a male voice asked. "Yes, sir," Chike replied cautiously. "There's a car that broke down on the highway before Quell. The driver said you're the one who can fix it. Can you come now?" Chike looked outside. The rain was still heavy. "It's raining, sir. But if you can wait, I'll come." The man's voice was firm. "It's urgent. We'll pay well." Without another word, Chike grabbed his small toolbox and wore his raincoat. He trekked under the storm, his slippers sinking into muddy puddles. The road stretched long, the kind that made one feel alone in the world. When he finally saw the car, his steps slowed. It wasn't just any car. It was a brand new black Benz. The lights blinked faintly through the rain, like a signal from another world. A tall man in a neat shirt stood beside it, drenched but calm. "You're Chike?" "Yes, sir," he said, breathing hard. "Can you help us?" The car just stopped. Chike nodded and opened the bonnet. The engine was nothing like the ones he usually worked on, but he recognized the systems. He had studied them in those late-night videos. Carefully, he began checking connections, his fingers moving with quiet confidence. The man watched, curious, as Chike worked for nearly an hour. When the engine finally roared back to life, the man's eyes widened. "You're good," he said. Chike smiled faintly. Just lucky, sir. The man looked impressed. I own a workshop in Enugu. I need someone like you. Can you come by next week? Chike froze, unsure if he heard right. Me? Yes, you. We'll talk there. You have talent. When the man drove off, Chike stood by the roadside, soaked but smiling. His heart pounded not from the cold, but from something new, hope. He walked back slowly, feeling like the rain had washed something heavy off his shoulders. That night, lying on his small bed, he couldn't sleep. His mind was full of the Benz engine, the man's offer, and the thought that maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. Morning came quietly. The village carried on as usual, Okafor shouting at drivers, Adaora frying plantains, children chasing each other near the market. Chike walked past them, his eyes calm but his thoughts alive. He didn't say a word about what happened. He just went back to work, fixing an old Peugeot like nothing was different. But deep inside him, something had already shifted. For the first time, he believed the world might finally see more than the mechanic. And when night came again, he took out a small notebook and wrote one line at the top of a clean page, Enugu next week. Then he closed it gently, his lips forming a quiet smile that no one would understand yet. The morning air felt different that day, like it carried a quiet whisper that only Chike could hear. He woke before dawn, long before the first sound of traders filled the air. For a moment, he just sat at the edge of his narrow bed, staring at the oil-stained notebook on his wooden table. The single line he wrote the night before, Enugu next week, looked almost like a prophecy. He rose slowly, washed his face with water from a small plastic bowl, and put on his worn shirt. The air smelled faintly of wet earth from the night's rain. He packed his tools neatly into his old iron box, arranging them carefully like they were gold. Every spanner, every screwdriver, had been part of his survival. He couldn't afford to lose any. As the first light began to stretch across the roofs of Umuozu, he stepped out. The street was quiet except for a few women sweeping in front of their shops. Adaora was already at her food stand, fanning the charcoal fire. When she saw him, she waved. Chike, you're up early. Work no day tire you? He smiled. Work can't kill me. I'm planning to travel soon. Her hand stopped midair. Travel? To where? To Enugu. There's a man who owns a workshop there. He asked me to come. Her face softened into surprise, then pride. Chike, you mean it? He nodded. He said I should come next week. She leaned on her table, smiling. I told you. One day, that hand of yours will bring something big. You see. He laughed lightly, shaking his head. I just hope it's real. People say many things. Adaora looked at him firmly. It's real. You deserve it. Don't let fear spoil it. He thanked her, bought a plate of rice to eat later, and went to his workshop. The day felt longer than usual. Every passing hour, his mind drifted to Enugu, the city he'd only heard about from travelers. He imagined wide roads, cars that glided silently, and workshops filled with modern tools instead of rusted ones. That evening, after he locked his shop, he sat by the roadside and watched cars pass. Some drivers waved, some didn't bother. But Chike wasn't watching for attention, he was studying. His eyes followed each movement, the turn of a steering, the sound of gears, the way headlights blinked as cars curved into the night. He was storing every detail, like a man preparing for an exam. The days that followed moved slowly. Each morning, he worked with even more focus, as though trying to prove something to himself before leaving. Customers noticed. Chike, your hands are magic, one man said after his stubborn engine finally started. Chike smiled but said nothing. Praise didn't move him anymore, only progress did. The night before he was to leave, Adaora came to his room. She held a small bag in her hand. This is for you, she said, placing it on his table. He frowned. What's inside? Just some food and water for your journey. I know how you are, you'll forget to eat. He looked at her with quiet gratitude. Ada, you didn't have to. I wanted to, she said softly. Chike, promise me something. What? Don't forget us here when you make it. He chuckled lightly. Me? Forget? Never. They talked for a while, mostly about nothing, about the market, about Okafor's latest quarrel with drivers, about how life in Umuozu never changed. But beneath their laughter was something unspoken, something that neither of them wanted to name. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. Travel safe, Chike, she said quietly. I will, he replied, his voice lower than usual. The next morning, he was on the first bus out of the village. He sat by the window, his small bag on his lap. As the bus pulled away, he looked out one last time at the place that had been his whole world. The workshop, the dusty roads, the faces he knew so well, they all blurred behind him. The road to Enugu was long and winding, filled with bumps that made his body ache. But he didn't mind. His heart raced faster than the bus itself. He kept imagining what awaited him. When he finally arrived, the noise and movement hit him at once. Cars everywhere, tall buildings, signs flashing names he didn't recognize. Enugu was alive in a way Umuozu never was. He stood by the park for a while, unsure of where to go next. The man had said he would send his driver, but there was no one in sight. He waited. Minutes turned into hours. He began to worry he'd been fooled. But just as he was about to ask a taxi for directions, a sleek grey car stopped beside him. A man stepped out, dressed smartly. You're Chike? Yes, sir. Oga sent me. Enter, let's go. The drive took nearly half an hour. They passed clean streets, bright shops, and tall gates that made Chike wonder how people built such things. When they finally stopped, the driver pointed. That's the workshop. Chike stepped out, staring. The building was large, with wide glass windows and polished floors. He could see several cars parked inside, modern, expensive ones. Mechanics in neat uniforms worked quietly, their movements precise. It looked nothing like the messy sheds back home. The man who had called him days ago, Mr. Juru, was standing near the entrance, talking to another worker. When he saw Chike, he smiled and waved him over. You came, he said warmly. Yes, sir. Good. I've been waiting for you. Come, let me show you around. They walked through the workshop, and Chike's eyes couldn't stop moving. Every corner had tools he'd only seen online. There were lifts that raised cars off the ground, computers for diagnostics, and engines that looked more like art than machines. Mr. Juru stopped beside a black Lexus. This is where we test skills. Fix this, and I'll know if you belong here. Chike looked at the car, nodded, and rolled up his sleeves. For the next 2 hours, he worked silently. His fingers moved with precision, his mind calm. Sweat rolled down his neck, but he didn't notice. Every screw he turned felt like proof that he was born for this. When he finished, the engine came alive smoothly. The other workers stared. Even Mr. Juru looked surprised. You didn't learn this in a village, he said. Chike smiled faintly. I did, sir. Just not in the usual way. Mr. Juru laughed. You're something else. From today, you're part of my team. We'll talk about your pay later. Chike bowed his head slightly. Thank you, sir. That night, Mr. Juru offered him a small room behind the workshop. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. Lying on the bed, Chike stared at the ceiling for a long time. The city noises outside reminded him that he was far from home, but also closer to his dream than ever. Days turned into weeks. He learned quickly, fixing cars that even older mechanics avoided. Customers began asking for him by name. Where's that new boy from the village? The one with the steady hands, they'd ask. And each time, Chike would come forward, humble as always, but his confidence growing quietly. He didn't tell anyone from Umuozu how well he was doing. Not even Ada. He wanted to build something solid first, something that would speak louder than words. One Saturday, As he was cleaning tools after work, Mr. Juru walked up to him. "There's a car coming next week. Brand new Benz. Belongs to a businessman from Lagos. I want you to handle it." Chike froze for a second. "Me?" "Yes, you. I trust your hand." That night, sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake thinking about the Benz. Something about it felt like a sign. The same kind of car that changed his life once was coming again. He didn't know why, but deep inside, it felt like destiny had circled back to test him once more. He closed his eyes and whispered softly to himself, "They called me a mechanic. Let them keep calling me that. One day, they'll see what a mechanic can become." And with that quiet vow, he drifted into sleep, not knowing how close his turning point truly was. The morning of the delivery felt charged with something Chike couldn't quite name. Even before the sun rose fully, he was awake, sitting on the edge of his bed with his elbows on his knees. His heart beat fast, not out of fear but anticipation. He kept replaying Mr. Juru's words in his mind, "A brand new Benz. You'll handle it." It wasn't the first time he had worked on a car that fine, but something about this one felt different, almost personal. It reminded him of that rainy night in Umuozu, the sound of the engine roaring back to life, and the man who had unknowingly pulled him out of the mud of small beginnings. He dressed carefully, smoothing the collar of his faded shirt before heading to the workshop. By the time he arrived, the compound was already alive with movement. Workers swept the floor, cleaned windows, and arranged tools. The smell of new oil hung in the air. Chike went straight to his corner, checking every piece of equipment he might need. He moved like a man preparing for war. Around mid-morning, a deep sound rolled through the gate, the kind of sound that made heads turn. The Benz had arrived. Its silver body gleamed under the sunlight like liquid metal. The driver stepped out, opened the back door, and a tall man in a dark suit emerged. He had a calm, commanding presence, the kind of man whose shoes never touched dirt. Mr. Juru hurried out to welcome him. "Chief Anine, you're welcome, sir." The man nodded, glancing briefly around the workshop. His eyes landed on Chike for a moment, then moved away. "That's the mechanic you told me about?" "Yes, sir," said Juru. "He's the best hand we have." Chike approached respectfully. "Good morning, sir." Chief Anine gave a short nod. "Good morning. Handle this car well. It's new. I don't want scratches." "Yes, sir," Chike replied simply. The chief and Juru went inside the office, leaving Chike alone with the car. He stood before it for a few seconds, studying it closely. It was beauty made of steel, smooth lines, silent power, every detail crafted to perfection. He walked around it slowly, his fingers tracing the edges without touching. Then he opened the bonnet and leaned in. Everything inside was foreign and familiar at once. It was like reading a new language written in a handwriting he somehow already understood. He took his time, inspecting, listening to the hum when he turned the key slightly, feeling the soft vibration of the engine beneath his palm. Every sound spoke to him, telling him what needed attention. Other workers watched from a distance. They'd never seen Chike look so focused. His movements were slow but sure, each action deliberate. He didn't speak to anyone. It was just him and the machine. Hours passed. When he finally straightened up, his face glistened with sweat. He wiped it with a cloth, shut the bonnet, and turned to Juru, who had returned with the chief. "It's done, sir," he said. The chief frowned slightly. "So soon?" "Yes, sir. I checked everything. It's perfect now." The chief walked closer, peered into the car, then entered. He turned the key. The engine came alive with a deep, smooth sound that filled the workshop like music. Juru looked at Chike and smiled. "You've done it again," he whispered. Chief Anine stepped out, impressed. "You know your work," he said. "If you ever need anything, come to me." Chike bowed slightly. "Thank you, sir." When the chief left, Juru clapped him on the shoulder. "I knew you were special, Chike. That car could have made anyone nervous, but you handled it like a master. Chike smiled faintly. I just did my job, sir. From today, Juru continued, you'll be in charge of all high-end repairs. You've earned it. It was a simple statement, but to Chike, it felt like a door had opened. The kind of door that changed everything behind it. Weeks turned into months. His name began to travel quietly among car owners across Enugu. Men from other workshops came to watch him work, pretending to chat but really studying his methods. Some even asked for his help secretly when they couldn't fix certain cars. Chike never turned them down. He had learned long ago that helping others didn't reduce one's shine, it made it brighter. At night, he often walked to a small roadside joint to eat. The city lights shimmered around him, and sometimes, he'd see cars pass that reminded him of the one he fixed that rainy night. He would smile to himself, remembering how far he'd come. But no matter how fine his new life looked, his heart never lost its softness for home. He still thought about Ada Aura sometimes. About her laughter, her teasing voice, and the plate of rice she saved for him even when he couldn't pay. He had her number, but he never called. Something in him wanted to show her in person, not through words, that the dream had worked. One Sunday, while cleaning the workshop, Juru called him aside. Chike, you're traveling to Lagos next week. Lagos? Yes. There's a car show. Some of my best staff will be going. You'll represent us. Chike felt his chest tighten. He had never left the southeast before. The idea of being in a place where the best mechanics from across the country gathered sounded unreal. Thank you, sir. I'll do my best. I know you will, Juru said, smiling. And Chike, prepare well. You might meet some important people there. That night, Chike barely slept. He imagined tall buildings, more cars, and opportunities waiting like unopened doors. He also thought about Umuozu, how Okafor might still be mocking him, how Ada Aura might still be selling food by the roadside. He promised himself that after Lagos, he would go back home. But when he did, he wouldn't walk in with oil-stained clothes and a tired face. He would drive in with something that spoke louder than words. The day of the trip arrived quickly. The company van picked them up early. The highway stretched endlessly, lined with small towns and waving palms. Chike sat by the window, watching the world speed by. He thought of the boy who used to walk barefoot to fetch spare parts and smiled quietly. That boy had turned into this man, someone people trusted, respected, and even envied. When they reached Lagos, the sight left him speechless. Skyscrapers rose into the sky, lights flickered even in daylight, and the sound of engines filled the air like a constant heartbeat. The car show was unlike anything he had imagined: rows of sleek cars, polished floors, and people in suits discussing engines like poetry. He stood beside the company's display car, answering questions confidently. His calm voice, quiet intelligence, and simple manner drew people in. By the end of the day, even other companies had noticed him. A man approached him as the event ended. He introduced himself as a representative from a foreign automobile brand looking to establish a new branch in Nigeria. You're the mechanic from Enugu, right? The man asked. Yes, sir. I heard you fixed a Benz that others couldn't touch. We need people like you. Would you be interested in joining our technical team? Chike was silent for a moment, unsure if it was real. I'd be honored, sir. Good. I'll send word to your boss. Expect our call soon. The next few days passed in a blur. When he returned to Enugu, Juru called him into the office, smiling proudly. You've made us proud, Chike. They reached out already. They want you in their team. It's a big opportunity. I'll miss you, but you've earned it. Chike stood speechless, his heart pounding. Sir, I don't even know what to say. Say thank you, and get ready. You're moving up. And just like that, the world widened again for him. Within months, Chike was working with advanced systems, cars most people only saw in magazines. He learned faster than anyone expected. His quiet drive made him stand out among men with degrees and certificates. Soon, his name began to echo not just in Enugu but across states. Then, one day, while testing a new Benz model, something clicked in his heart. He knew it was time. He had promised himself long ago that he would return home not to fix old cars but to show what a mechanic could become. So he bought a car, not just any car, but the latest Benz. Silver, sleek, and pure power. He handled the steering like it was part of him. When he drove through the gate of Umuozu that morning, the engine's soft hum drew eyes from every corner. People stopped what they were doing. Dust rose behind him as he slowed near the market. Okafor, standing by his bus, squinted hard. "Is that not Chike?" he asked aloud. The car stopped gently by Adeora's stand. The door opened, and Chike stepped out in a crisp shirt and clean trousers. Adeora's hand froze midair, the ladle dripping stew back into the pot. "Chike," she whispered. He smiled, the same gentle smile from years ago. "Adeora, how far?" She blinked, almost unable to speak. You drove this?" He nodded. "Yes. They called me a mechanic. I just came to show them what a mechanic can become." The crowd gathered slowly, whispers rising like wind through dry leaves. Okafor pushed his way forward, eyes wide, words stuck in his throat. Chike turned to him, calm and steady. "You see, Okafor, we all fix something in life. Some of us fix engines, some fix pride." Then he turned back to Adeora. "Come. Let's take a ride." The door of the Benz closed softly as she entered, the engine purring beneath their feet. As they drove through the village, faces followed them, mouths open in disbelief. For the first time, Umuozu saw Chike not as the boy from the roadside workshop, but as the man who turned grease into glory. And as the car glided away, the village that once mocked him whispered a new name, not Mechanic Boy, but Chike the man who made it. The sound of the Benz's tires on the dusty road still echoed in people's minds long after it vanished from sight. Even the air in Umuozu carried a strange mix of disbelief and pride. 4 days, nothing else mattered. Conversations at the market, by the stream, even in evening gatherings, everything began with Chike's name. "Did you see him?" one woman asked as she pounded yam near her doorstep. "I saw with my own eyes," another replied. "That car. It shined like mirror. Our Chike drove it like a city man." Someone nearby laughed. "And to think Okafor used to call him Mechanic Boy. God has shamed pride today." Even children picked up the story, shouting his name in songs as they played. But no one felt the weight of that moment as deeply as Chike himself. He parked the Benz beside his old workshop, the same place where his journey began. The little shed looked even smaller now, half swallowed by weeds, its roof bent with age. For a while, he just stood there, staring. Every mark on that wall held a memory: long nights, cold mornings, days he went hungry but still worked. Adeora stood beside him quietly. She hadn't said much since he arrived. Her eyes were still searching him, as if she was trying to convince herself he was real. The suit, the polished shoes, the calm way he moved, it all looked like someone else wearing Chike's face. "You haven't changed," she finally said softly. He turned to her, smiling gently. "Maybe on the outside I did, but inside, I'm still that same boy who used to eat your jollof rice on credit." She laughed, covering her mouth. The sound of it was like a breeze cutting through the afternoon heat. "You remember?" "How can I forget?" he said. "Those plates of rice kept me alive when I had nothing." They stood there for a long while, the silence between them warm, not heavy. People had gathered at a distance, whispering and pointing, but Chike didn't care. He opened the car door and brought out a small envelope. "This is for you," he said, handing it to Adeora. She looked at it, puzzled. "What's this?" "Something small." "Open it." Inside were crisp notes of naira, more money than she had probably ever held at once. She looked up quickly. "Chike, I can't take this." "You can," he said softly. "You helped me when I had nothing. You never mocked me. You believed in me. Let me thank you in my own way." Her eyes shimmered with tears she tried to hide. "Chike, you don't owe me anything." "I do," he said firmly. "You were kind when kindness was rare. Please, just take it." She nodded slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she tucked the envelope into her wrapper. Okafor, who had been watching from across the street, finally gathered courage to walk closer. His usual swagger was gone. His voice was quieter than anyone had ever heard it. "Chike, my brother," he began awkwardly, "you've really done well. I won't lie, I didn't expect this." Chike turned to him calmly. "Okafor, it's fine. You don't have to say anything. We all spoke the way we saw life then." "No, let me talk," Okafor insisted. "I used to laugh at you, but seeing this, seeing how far you've gone, it humbled me. Forgive me." Chike smiled faintly. "There's nothing to forgive. I never held it against you. Sometimes mockery is what pushes a man to move." Okafor looked down, nodding slowly. "Still, you're a better man than me. I respect you." When Okafor left, Aurora touched Chike's arm gently. "You're still calm," she said. "Even with everything you've achieved." He shrugged lightly. The higher a car climbs, the steadier the driver must be. Later that evening, the news of Chike's return spread so far that even elders who rarely left their compounds came out to see him. The village square was alive with murmurs. Someone brought a chair, another brought cola nuts. An old man named Pa Obinna, who had once scolded Chike for wasting his youth on that dirty mechanic work, called him over. "My son," the old man said with a proud smile, "we've all heard of your success. You've made Umuozu proud. You've shown the young ones that no job is too small for greatness." Chike bowed respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I only did what I knew how to do." "That humility is what will keep you rising," the man said. "Sit, let's share cola." The crowd clapped as Chike sat among them. Stories began to flow, laughter followed, and the night carried a kind of joy the village hadn't seen in a long time. When the gathering ended, Aurora walked with him back toward his old workshop. The moon hung softly above them, lighting the road in silver. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I'm not stopping here. I want to build something here in Umuozu. A proper workshop. One that teaches boys like I used to be. They shouldn't have to leave before they can dream." Aurora smiled. "You'll do it. I know you will." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'll need help though. Someone to manage things when I'm not around. Someone who knows the village and the people." "Are you asking me?" she teased, her smile hiding a small blush. He grinned. "Maybe I am. Then my answer is yes," she said softly. The next weeks moved fast. Chike began turning his words into action. He bought a large piece of land near the market, hired builders, and imported equipment from Enugu. People gathered daily to watch as walls rose and machines arrived in crates. The signboard read simply, "Umuozu Auto Tech Center, founded by Chike Okeke." It became the pride of the village. Boys who once wandered idle now came early, eager to learn. Chike trained them himself, showing them everything he knew. He taught not just how to fix engines, but how to fix their minds, to see beyond where they stood. Aurora managed the accounts and suppliers. She was efficient, firm, and kind, earning the respect of everyone. Together, they built something that changed the rhythm of the village. For the first time, Umuozu had a place where hope wasn't just spoken, it was seen. One afternoon, a convoy of cars pulled into the compound. The dust rose as doors opened. Out stepped Chief Anine, dressed in a crisp white kaftan. He looked around with quiet satisfaction. "So this is what you built," he said with a smile. "Yes, sir," Chike replied. "This is home." The chief nodded approvingly. "You've done well, Chike. You could have stayed in the city, but you came back to build. That's what real men do." Chike thanked him, then showed him around. The chief was impressed. "You've given this community something valuable. I'll speak to the state people. They should support this kind of work." That evening, after the chief left, Chike sat outside the workshop with Ada. The sound of crickets filled the air. The moonlight touched her face softly. He turned to her. You know, Ada, I used to think success was about leaving here. Now I know it's about what you bring back. She looked at him with quiet admiration. And you brought back plenty. He smiled. Not just cars and buildings. I brought back gratitude. They sat there in silence, listening to the night. Around them, the workshop lights glowed faintly, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. From afar, the hum of a car engine drifted through the still air, blending perfectly with the rhythm of their hearts. Weeks later, at the official opening of the auto center, people came from nearby towns to witness it. Banners hung, music played, and the air carried excitement. The governor's representative gave a short speech, praising Chike's courage and vision. When it was his turn to speak, Chike stood before the crowd, his voice steady and clear. When I started fixing cars, he began, people laughed. They said I was wasting my time. But what they didn't understand was that when you fix something with your hands long enough, your life starts fixing itself too. This place isn't just for cars, it's for every young person who thinks they can't rise. You can. You just need patience and faith. The crowd erupted in applause. Ada watched from the side, her heart full. After the ceremony, as guests left and the evening settled in, Chike walked toward his Benz. He placed a hand on the bonnet, smiling to himself. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a symbol, a reminder of every insult, every night of hunger, every broken dream he refused to abandon. Ada joined him, leaning slightly on the car. You did it, she said softly. He turned to her, his smile gentle. We did it. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to slow, wrapped in the quiet satisfaction of fulfilled dreams. And as the night deepened, the lights from the new auto center glowed like stars against the dark sky, proof that sometimes, the hands the world underestimates are the same hands that rebuild it. The sun rose over Umuozu, spilling gold across the village and lighting up the new auto center like a beacon. The village had changed. People moved with a quiet pride in their step, their eyes reflecting the hope that Chike had brought back. Every corner of the village, from the dusty market paths to the small side alleys, carried whispers of his name. But Chike hardly noticed the praise. He had always been driven by something deeper, a vision that went beyond recognition or applause. That morning, he stood beside the Benz, polishing its silver body while the mechanics busied themselves inside the workshop. Ada brought him a cup of steaming tea. He took it, nodding his thanks, and smiled faintly. You know, he said, sometimes I still can't believe this is real. She leaned against the car, arms crossed loosely. Believe it. You built it. You earned it. He laughed softly. It doesn't feel like building. It feels like planting seeds and watching them grow. The first customers of the day arrived in small groups, bringing engines with minor faults. Chike moved among them, guiding his team, showing them how to listen to a car's subtle whispers. Each gesture, each word he spoke was careful, deliberate. Ada managed the accounts with quiet authority, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. The center was a living organism, humming in perfect balance, and Chike had become its heartbeat. By midday, a convoy of luxury cars appeared on the horizon. People stopped and stared. Among them was a fleet of the latest Benz models, Porsche SUVs, and Range Rovers. The drivers all looked professional, disciplined. One of them, a tall man in a navy suit, stepped forward and asked to see the manager. Duru pointed him to Chike. The man approached, his eyes sharp and calculating. Are you Chike Okeke? Yes, sir, Chike replied steadily. I've heard about your work. We have a collection of high-performance vehicles that need custom tuning. I need someone who can handle them with precision. Would you be interested? Chike felt a familiar thrill coursing through him. He nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I can handle it. The man extended his hand. Welcome to the team. You'll find that no one works like you do. Your reputation precedes you. By evening, the workshop had turned into a whirlwind of activity. Cars came in, engines were tested, adjustments were made, and Chaik moved between stations like a conductor guiding an orchestra. He could feel the pulse of each machine, and it mirrored his own heartbeat. When the workday finally ended, the village square had gathered for the weekly market meeting, but today it felt different. News had traveled fast. Chaik had brought attention and prestige to Umuozu, and people wanted to celebrate. Fires were lit for evening cooking, children ran around shouting his name, and elders sat with quiet smiles, proud of the boy who refused to be small. Chaik walked slowly to the square, Adaora beside him. The crowd parted instinctively. Pa Obinna, the elder who had once doubted him, raised a hand in blessing. "You have turned our village into a story worth telling," he said. "Not just for you, but for everyone here." Chaik bowed humbly. "I only did what I love. What matters is that others see that hard work, patience, and belief can create more than money. It can create hope." The villagers cheered. Some of them had never clapped their hands for anything other than their crops or festivals. This felt bigger. They had witnessed transformation in motion. Later that night, as the village grew quiet, Chaik returned to the workshop. He walked past the rows of gleaming machines, the quiet hum of some still warm engines filling the air. He paused by the Benz. Its silver surface reflected the moonlight, almost as if it were alive. Adaora appeared behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You've done more than anyone expected," she said softly. He looked at her and shook his head. "No. I haven't done enough yet. This is only the beginning. I want this place to teach, to inspire, to grow beyond anything we can imagine. I want the boys here, and girls too someday, to know that dreams don't have to stay dreams." She smiled. "And you will. Because you are not afraid to build what others think is impossible." Chaik reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook, worn at the edges. He opened it and began sketching designs for the next stage of the auto center, new bays for modern cars, classrooms for students, even a small library where mechanics could learn about technology and engineering beyond engines. As he sketched, the air outside carried the soft sounds of the night, a distant motorbike, the occasional bark of a dog, the faint laughter of children who still lingered in the street. For Chaik, it felt like the village itself was breathing with him, alive with possibilities. A week later, news crews arrived from Enugu and Lagos. They wanted to cover the story of the village that had produced a mechanic who could handle the most sophisticated cars in the country. Cameras captured Chaik at work, teaching apprentices, consulting with Adaora, and even driving the Benz around the compound. His story was broadcast widely, and messages poured in from people inspired by his journey. Despite all the attention, Chaik remained calm. He welcomed each visitor with the same quiet confidence, the same humility that had always defined him. He spoke about discipline, about vision, and about the value of believing in yourself even when the world laughs. One evening, as the sun set in soft orange streaks over Umuozu, Chaik and Adaora stood by the workshop's entrance. The center glowed warmly behind them, lights reflecting on polished floors, cars lined like trophies. "They'll remember this," Adaora said softly. "Not just the cars, but what you built here." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. "They will. But more than that, I hope they remember that even small beginnings can become something extraordinary. That the hands they once mocked can shape the future." The village lay silent beneath the twilight sky. Somewhere in the distance, an engine purred softly, the hum echoing across the rooftops. Chaik looked out at it and smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Every insult, every doubt, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, they had all led here. He turned back toward the workshop, taking Adaora's hand. "Come, let's walk through what we've built." She squeezed his hand, smiling. "Lead the way." Together, they stepped inside. The hum of machines, the glow of lights, and the quiet pride of a village that had finally seen its own potential wrapped around them. Chike had not only returned home, he had transformed it. And as he stood there, the last line of his journey settled in his heart. They called him a mechanic. They laughed at the name. But today, he had driven not just a Benz into the compound, he had driven a new future for himself and everyone who dared to dream alongside him. The night stretched on, and the auto center glowed against the dark sky, a lighthouse in the village, a promise to all who watched. Greatness often comes from the hands people least expect. And so Chike's story was no longer just about engines, grease, or the road, it was about vision, courage, and the power of believing in what others cannot yet see. The village slept with the hum of engines echoing softly, dreams now alive in hearts that had once only whispered hope. Chike looked toward the horizon, the Benz parked beside him gleaming under the stars. A quiet smile played across his lips. The journey had begun in a small workshop, but it had ended in transformation, not just for him, but for everyone who dared to watch him rise. And from that night forward, whenever someone mentioned his name in Umuozu, it was no longer with mockery. It was said with respect, awe, and a quiet sense of inspiration that would never fade. Chike had become more than a mechanic. He had become a legend. Thank you for staying with us through the incredible journey of Chike, the mechanic who proved that talent, patience, and determination can transform lives. From the dusty streets of Umuozu to driving the latest Benz and building a future for his village, his story is a powerful reminder that no dream is too small and no beginning too humble. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales that inspire and captivate. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment telling us the country you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share the next adventure with you. Stay inspired, stay dreaming, and remember, every journey begins with a single step.